creatives to join our team. Sell powerful advertising solutions across television, digital, and social media platforms, and help brands tell their story. If you have strong communication skills, a passion for sales, and the drive to succeed, join WESN today. Send your CV to marketing@wsncc.com or WhatsApp 68-61662 and start building your future.
We feel that about 50% of women who are infertile or subfertile, endometriosis is an underlying factor. So it used to play a role.
Half of the women who present with infertility problems will turn out to have
an underlying endometriosis as a cofactor affecting their fertility.
WESN.
Good morning, this is Talking Point, I'm sure Michael Small. And they say, never stop your enemy while they're making mistakes. That said, technically I am a third-party observer. I have no enemy when it comes to governance, politics, the economy and the like, or to some extent crime fighting. Obviously I don't stand on the side of criminals, let them commit crime. But I've spent 4 to 5 years criticizing a PNM government, and now we have a UNC government, 4 years criticizing a PNM government, now 1 year criticizing a UNC government. And technically, I wouldn't say either government was my enemy. So I am at a loss of what to make of this, because technically I have been trying the entire time that I've been on the air to advise public figures, don't say anything stupid. It just, if you want to summarize like 80% of what I say, it boils down to don't say anything stupid. And I don't know about you, but for the life of me, I really don't know what to make of the Prime Minister's comments with regard to the protesters. Now, I get it. On a very basic level, I could almost understand her point of view. Keyword almost. Because I don't know how she will have a point of view that would allow her to go as far as to say that the protesters are, apparently, this is a quote, the protesters, well, sorry, she had no time for quote-unquote victim gimmickry. Where were the protesters when more than 5,000 people have been murdered? This is the usual, I don't know what else to say, right? Like, I don't want to say it this way, but I cannot formulate a different way, a nicer way, a gentler way, an easier way to say it. This is the usual political slop. I have no explanation. The public is angry. I'm going to deflect. And ironically, you could argue this is, on some measure, victim blaming. And basically, it makes just about every criticism that the UNC had in the last, well, say the 4 years before the election, right? Or the 3 years before the election, or even earlier. All of their criticism directed at Dr. Keith Rowley with regards to his manner of speech, with regards to how combative and defensive and abusive his speech was to reporters, to members of the public, to anyone that disagreed with him. It kind of makes all of that ring hollow if this is what you're going to say. If you're literally going to have no patience and understanding, and more importantly, exactly how does the Prime Minister expect this to make the situation better? Is this leadership? Is this bringing the country to a greater understanding? Is someone telling her it's only these people that are upset and everybody else is fine with this? Because somebody, between saying that they're protesters and her uttering those words, I would hope there's a chain of people, right? It's not just necessarily Prime Minister alone. And somebody in that chain really is not smart enough to be in the position where they're at. And if there is no chain, if there were no advisors, if there were no staff, right, giving reports to the Prime Minister, if it was literally just her looking out a window, right, or just asking someone, what's going on? That's what's going on, and this is what comes out of her mouth. Well, then I guess there's only one person to look at what I just said. Because, as I said yesterday, if this is the level of your discourse, it's better if you don't speak. This is not making it better. I don't understand. Now, apparently, of course, there was the protest. And from what I understand, protesters were arrested, which again, I have pointed to the fact you have to be prepared for that. I understand that the police service is potentially, you know, public enemy number one right now, according to members of the public. But at the end of the day, they have a job to do. What I do find interesting, though, is that this is not technically the only protest that has been going on. I know that sometime earlier there was a protest with regards to jobs. Which is interesting. There's a Rio Claro Unemployment Association. I guess they are also victim gimmickry. Because government today, you know, so I mean, you know, I guess their unemployment is false, right? But more importantly, and I'm not faulting anyone, apparently they had a very small protest, right? I don't know how much people it was, and they might have been out of the way. They took to the streets of San Fernando. This is not necessarily hard to participate next to DPP's building, which technically is not something you should just easily allow, at least not without having to consider security considerations. Forgive me for the inelegant speech. But also, apparently, this is so convenient. Now, I don't know if this was arranged by the party, but apparently UNC members could just be rank and file run-of-the-mill members, did it on their own. Probably not, though. Probably not. Given the way how our politics works, I would be more surprised if this was an independent, spontaneous occurrence as opposed to somebody in the party organizes. But anyway, apparently they were protesting Alderman Victor Roberts to resign because he crossed the floor, and there's that whole debate, which technically, I understand how our parties operate. But just because they want to operate that way doesn't mean the law in all cases says that is how legally our system of government works. Now, that is secondary to the point I'm trying to make. is the Prime Minister going to tell the UNC members who were protesting Victor Roberts, let me see exactly what she said. You know, is she going to tell them, I'm trying to find a quote here, that those who are free to mash up the place will face the consequences of the law? Because think about this. She is basically using the argument that, where were you when so many people were murdered? Why didn't you? We never saw these grifters. I swear, somebody in her camp is watching too much YouTube and American social media with regards to political commentary. I don't necessarily know if they fully understand what they're watching. But anyway, these grifters protesting against the gangs and telling the violent criminals, hands up, don't shoot. Now, that is one of the most pathetically laughable things that I have ever heard. So what you're saying is, you can't believe the protesters who are protesting what they think is misbehavior by agents of the state because they didn't go and protest the gangs. Think about that for a second. Now, one might think, you know, when you're hearing the argument that she's meaning they didn't go and protest against gang violence and march against the previous administration and blah, 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 you know, and have marches of solidarity around the savannah, on the highway, to the police admin building, to the Red House, whatever, right? No, she's saying, and telling the violent criminals, hands up, don't shoot. Because that's how you deal with crime. You go into gang-controlled areas to protest them with your hands up, with the expectation that they're not going to shoot you. No, the whole point of hands up, don't shoot is because any free society, any democratic country has an expectation that law enforcement isn't going to shoot them when their hands are up. You haven't even addressed the fact that he died with his hands up. You couldn't even figure out a way to straddle the line, to work between the margins, to figure out a way to diplomatically ease tensions without undermining whatever case the state may or may not legitimately have. No. You're going off like a raging bull with this nonsense. This isn't leadership. When UNC wins, everybody else has to get to the back of the line because apparently only UNC can protest. Because at the end of the day, obviously, there's one protest that makes the government look bad. One. The Rio Claro Unemployment Association, whose name, ironically, is, I would argue, very damning to the current situation, state of the economy, right? Doesn't have the same momentum right now as this protest. And I guess the Prime Minister has decided, I don't want to be blamed for this. Don't mind the fact that it happened under my watch with a commissioner I chose, right? With the support of our Minister of Homeland Security, I chose. And instead of figuring out how to speak to her citizens, no, it's victim gimmickry. There's a lot of things that she said that she could have said. She didn't need to say all that. She didn't need to say all that. I don't know. The thing is, from what I understand, politicians do not take advice on public communications, on public relations, right? They don't take advice to what to say. They always know better. Which is why usually when a politician goes off half-cocked, it's either some party agenda with regards to what they want to communicate aggressively, or they're off on their own. There's no PR professional telling them, this is okay to say. Because let's not forget, Let's not forget, they made a big whole stink about promises made, promises kept, right? They still can't keep the promise they made to the PSA. That is the unwritten or unspoken implication of the still ongoing negotiations. They said they'll find the money. They still can't find the money yet. It's been over a year. They can't even begin to tell us where they may begin to look outside of everyone else's wallets where they're going to find the money. See, the thing is, you don't operate in a vacuum. Promises made, promises kept, my foot. What promises were kept? Whose promises did they keep? Hell, even I said when they made the promise, we need to understand, technically speaking, they were voted in. We had eyes wide open. They made the promises open to the public. We, on some level, as a public, we have to accept it, whether we like it or not, right? No. They can't even keep up that promise. This is hilarious. Because essentially, they are potentially setting up a certain level of dependency, of gratuity, politically, maybe. They couldn't even get that right. I don't understand, you know. I don't understand. Now I see where there's at least one photo that applies that the protesters, of course, were upset over the whole situation. Right, this is very interesting because one of the things is the perception of the DPP's office, which I find, I'll be honest, I didn't necessarily expect the situation to reach the point where people are going to suspect everything and everybody. Some of the callers initially, when the charges came down, their point of view, which I think is reasonable, is do you trust the DPP or not? Right? One of the, I can't remember, I think it might have been the media ambassador, Christopher Roon, pointed out, look, he has charged police in certain crimes, he has done certain, he's made certain decisions in certain other cases that we agree with. Now we disagree, like we trusted him then, don't we trust him now? So one of the interesting things, and let's not forget, the DPP did not move into the building that the PNM got for him because of security concerns. So when the police says you can't protest around the DPP's building, there are practical security considerations for that. That said, I did say, I personally will not tell people don't protest. You just have to be ready to face with the consequences, right? Because the thing is, ironically, and I guess this is what the Prime Minister ultimately doesn't understand because she's not as politically proficient as she might think. What is spreading the word that the protesters have, what is spreading the message, is not the fact that they went and called for the removal or the resignation of the Commissioner and the Minister of Homeland Security, called for greater police transparency. No. They got a lot more play in the media. They're going to get a lot more eyes of the public on their story because the police prevented them from protesting. But what made it, probably what's going to make it go over the top, is the Prime Minister is going to have some, according to reports in the news, ridiculous statement to make. And it doesn't matter if 99% of what she said was reasonable. It only takes 1% of nonsense. We've had protests before. And I hate to say this because I'm the one saying we don't protest enough. Not that I want to see random protests for willy-nilly things. But if people are legitimately, supposedly upset about things, and to some degree, this is where I could almost understand where the Prime Minister is coming from. Because I would say, yes, we should have been protesting crime long before. Why weren't we? But I'm not going to blame this group of people for the lack of protest of a national issue. Where was the UNC protesting crime? Where was the UNC marches about crime? Did Madam Prime Minister go off into the gang territories and do what she said apparently they should have done? Did she protest the criminals? Oh, no. After saying we're going to get rid of unnecessary security, we get what seemingly, based on the fact, similar to this case. They can't tell us what the threat is, right? They can't tell us what the threat is. They're so threatened that they're going to continue a publicly viewed session of Parliament without informing any of the staff of the Red House. They're going to continue engaging with an international politician in a relatively public manner without any extra security. But they were so threatened by one guy in Belmont one Friday afternoon randomly. According to the AG, way to spend your political capital on rubbish. But anyway, there has been a threat against the government from almost the very beginning. There has been a threat against the government in 2011. I don't know. Maybe at some point, if there keeps having a threat against a Kamala Prasad-Bissessar-led administration, maybe on some level, the problem isn't just the crime in the country. Maybe the problem is something to do with you, because that's the common denominator. We didn't have this, as far as did we have this in the UNC? Someone please tell me. Did Bazio Pandey have apparently threats against his life and his cabinet? What about the NAR? Because we assume the PNM had their arrangements, right? Whatever those arrangements may be, right? And when I say we assume, I'm not saying me. I'm saying that rhetorically in the general public. I mean, I don't know how accurate this was, but after the first threat against the government, then we see video of one government minister in a t-shirt and I guess jeans or cargo pants going into a fast food restaurant by himself. So afraid, so afraid. The need for security, the threats. Or is this a state of emergency for one guy? So I don't get it. I do not understand what the Prime Minister is thinking in this case. I do not have any contrarian, counterpoints for the sake of arguments. Consider this, consider that. This is ridiculous. This is just as bad as anything you wanted to complain about Dr. Keith Rowley. This is just as bad. In terms of individual understanding and awareness of the situation, this might be, although the stakes are not as high as, this might be just as bad as then Minister of Finance Colin Imbert not understanding what an audit is and not understanding that he cannot dictate the work of the Auditor General. A certain lack of awareness and stubbornness and defiance and self-righteousness. Apparently, lawyers for Kayasili has indicated she's willing to return, except they're asking for time because she's undergoing medical treatment. Which, I'll be honest, I would be more surprised if she got the extra time, because it doesn't seem as though the people overseeing this situation, aka the government, has any sort of awareness of how this is going to look and what's going on. Because regardless, here's the thing, if people are going to go so far as to disbelieve the DPP and say the whole system is corrupt, they are not seeing what you're seeing. They are not believing what you're saying. They're not believing the commissioner. They're not believing fully the charges. They're not believing fully the evidence, which they technically haven't seen. And again, this is a situation that you have created. I didn't tell you, don't tell the people nothing. I didn't tell you, don't be transparent, right? You decide not to be transparent. You decide to take certain practices and procedures and policies maybe a little too far. Or you decide to not figure out a way to communicate effectively within those limitations. No, you're acting as though you're entitled to the public's understanding. This is from the commissioner on up, right? I even feel sorry for all the DCPs right now because at the very least, I haven't heard them say anything stupid over this matter. Only the people above them, right? As much as people aren't going to trust at least half of the DCPs, they are all going to get flack for this situation. Them, the DPP, members of the judiciary, the prosecutors, everyone's going to get a lot of flack for this situation because of the commissioner and the people above him, with their lack of awareness and their self-righteousness. The we know better than you, so stop having a tantrum. These are the voters. You're supposed to win the next election with this attitude? Even the PNM did not act this self-righteously. At the height, even Stuart Young, I don't think, acted this self-righteously in the face of public criticism. He might have acted self-righteously in the case of opposition criticism. That's different. Not everybody in the public are members of the PNM. So, I'm out of time for this segment, so I'll end it there. I'll just say this. There's a report, right? There was a traffic situation near the Arimas Magistrate Court, and apparently a police officer discharged a firearm during that situation. Honestly, the report, and I'm trying to figure out the version of events that might have made it justifiable. I haven't seen the video. But the timing couldn't be any worse. Because at the very least, the opinion seems to be split. And the situation seems to be, regardless of how justified it might look, an unnecessary escalation. And former Commissioner Guy Griffith said it best. The incident reflected wider concerns about alleged abuse of authority by police officers. And here's one of the things that the government needs to understand. The public was fine about the SOE as long as they didn't feel abused. Because as ASP Arun pointed out, we haven't had a set of reports about the police abusing SOE powers against the general public, right? But it doesn't matter if these things are not directly related. At some point, if the public feels abused, they're going to start questioning this whole SOE thing more and more. And what's going to happen is the government is going to be defiant, they're going to not listen to the public, and they're going to lose the next election. Case closed. And here's the thing. If you care about the next election, maybe you should say something else besides whatever it is you think the Prime Minister wants to hear. Somebody needs to tell her what she needs to hear, because obviously she can't do it all on her own. Let's take a break. When we come back, we will welcome our guest. Stay tuned. This is Talking About the WSN. We'll be right back after this.
we feel that about 50% of women who are infertile or subfertile, endometriosis is the underlying factor. So it used to play a role.
Half of the women who present with infertility problems will turn out to have
an underlying endometriosis as a cofactor affecting their fertility.
Are you driven, ambitious, and ready to earn? WESN, the content capital, is expanding, and we're looking for dynamic media sales executives to join our team. Sell powerful advertising solutions across television, digital, and social media platforms, and help brands tell their story. If you have strong communication skills, a passion for sales, and the drive to succeed, join WESN today. Send your CV to marketing@wsncc.com or WhatsApp 68-61662 and start building your future.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide, Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
In this day of stay-at-home and work from home, home has never meant more than it does today. Whether you're looking to buy, rent, or build your new home, now is the time to get going. Gittins & Gittins Real Estate Agents are here to take you to that place of your dreams. Let us take you home. We help you find that rental to rest along the way, or journey with you to find your home destination. Investors and commercial enterprises too. Call us and we'll walk the distance to place your business in just the right location. Owners, leave the headaches to us. We'll find your tenants or buyers while you stay at home. We'll even manage your property at your bidding. Anything real estate, come home to Gittins & Gittins Real Estate. Call us at 760-3280 or 747-1220 or visit us at 16 Fifth Street in Woodbrook.
Hi, I am Emiliana Beechan and I am a mental health and conflict resolution consultant. Welcome to Mind Matters, the show where we explore the intricate world of mental health and the art of conflict resolution. Join us as we hear from mental health professionals, conflict resolution experts, and everyday people who have transformed their lives through understanding and communication. Mind Matters, WESN Content Capital.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
The home of Caribbean content is growing and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. as we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation. Contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region.
Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
I'm back here talking about the WSND Content Capital, and I am joined by Attorney at Law Frida Lee. To switch gears, I understand I am giving my opinion, but now we have a legal expert to go into the actual facts of the case, at least as much as he knows. Obviously, I don't believe you are part of the defense, right? And if you were, you wouldn't be able to speak to us. But the reason why this is important is I feel as though emotions are high and charged. I understand why it is so, and I have spoken about it ad nauseum about who I blame for that. But that actually doesn't mean that the case now is literally a situation reeking of corruption. There's nuance to this. There's a lot of details to this that we wouldn't necessarily understand because we are not attorneys and we don't deal with criminal trials and prosecution. So to try to help sort it out for us laymen, Frida Lee, attorney at law, welcome back to Talking Points.
Good morning, Sean. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming, because I guess one of the things in TNT is not everybody is wanting to speak about controversial topics all the time. So that said, this is a controversial case, but I feel part of it is because the public doesn't necessarily understand it. Like, say, you might understand it, or other people in the legal fraternity or even in law enforcement might understand it, at least to some extent. Yeah. So with regards to the case, with regards to the charges, I don't know if you want to start there breaking down, because I think it's something like 7 to 8 charges that eventually total was set against Masili.
Right. From what is placed in the public space, the instructions that comes from the DPP is to prefer a charge of death by manslaughter and 3 counts of endangering the lives of officers using a firearm, and also possession of a firearm, possession of ammunition, possession of a firearm for endangering life, and possession of ammunition to endanger life. So if we were to look at the charges, the mere fact that they're revealing now, meaning that the law enforcement is saying that there was a vehicle there was a gun in the vehicle, and that the gun was directed to officers, and shots were fired. 3 shots they indicate were fired at the officers. Accounts to the fact that we have 3 counts of shooting with intent to endanger life, or shooting with intent to endanger the lives of the officers. If we examine the video footage, you would see that when the vehicle came to a stop, in that stop position by Bassi Trace extension in St. Augustine, officers approached the vehicle side on, meaning 2 officers on the driver's side, on the front passenger end and one closer to the back end. Those 3 officers are alleging, they are claiming that they were met with heavy gunfire, and that a Glock was retrieved from the vehicle. What is really capturing the imagination of the public is that the revelation that there was that the officers were met with gunfire when they approached the vehicle was only revealed between January and May, some 4 to 5 months after. This is not a revelation that was given in real time. It was not even a revelation that was revealed within days of the incident.
And with regards to that, because there's always talk with cases where we can't talk about it as an active investigation, as an active case. Is that a detail that needs to be protected in order to protect the sanctity of the investigation? Because memory says before, we would have gotten some version of information like that on similar cases in the past.
Right. There's nothing that prevents the police in issues or in instances when there is public information. In this case, a video went viral.
Yeah.
So naturally, there is a certain amount of urgency from the public as to, could we get an explanation as to what is happening here? Because it looks like the police are shooting to the levels of force beyond that which is necessary to neutralize persons in a vehicle and the persons being civilian. This is not, it doesn't appear to the natural eye to be an exchange of gunfire. We are not seeing illuminatory light coming from the vehicle to see something is being fired from inside in the direction of everyone. It's looking as if it is, the police are just continuously shooting into a vehicle that is standstill, that is posing no threat to them. In keeping with the use of force policy that is consistent with persons who iron gun exchange with police officers, the police are allowed to use force that is necessary to neutralize the attack that they are facing. 19 shots being pumped into the body of an individual and another 4 shots into the second person, meaning that's a combination of 23 shots. If that isn't excessive, then God alone knows what is, especially when you're not seeing any signs of returning gunfire or gunfire being initiated by those in the vehicle and then returned by the officers. At some point in time, within those 23 shots that were fired, one would believe that the persons in the vehicle who are in a standstill position while you have moving targets outside, they would be able to reposition themselves, meaning the 3 officers, to take some sort of safety precaution to protect themselves. Surely, it ought not take 23 shots to achieve that objective.
Well, also, because we've had someone leave a voice note speaking to the aggression of the officers, because they went from behind cover. The suspect's vehicle crashed. It's half in a ditch. It's not moving, right? The passenger can't get out of the vehicle easily. And they didn't even wait, because it seems as though Mr. Samaru put his hands up almost immediately after he went to the ditch. So people, whether they are consciously aware of proper police procedure or they just find it's looking strange, are uncomfortable with how aggressive the police were acting. And I guess part of it is we haven't necessarily gotten those explanations with regard to that. I mean, to some extent, what you said isn't necessarily a revelation to me, but I think part of it is the person that got the 19 bullets, isn't he the one with his hands up? So how does that happen when you're they claim that the threat was the other individual, and just part of it is being this armchair forensic videographer, forensic scientist is not always necessarily helpful, but it goes back to these are concerns the public has, and we haven't really gotten any proper explanation to help us, manage our emotions and at least be reasonable and patient.
I think what we need to understand is this. There's a serious issue that this case raises, which is police officers and their ability to control themselves whilst on the job. and we have to angle this. I'm not in any way saying that the officers reacted or casting judgments in any way. I'm not saying that the officers overreacted or they reacted in a manner that they ought not to. We need to bear in mind that this issue began in Maloney, it ended in St. Augustine. It's an 11-kilometer journey. You know, if it transpired over a 12 to 20-minute period to getting from Maloney into to St. Augustine, adrenaline would have been pumping. The information we have through the newsprint is that there was a sting operation, that an informant approached the vehicle, that they stopped there, and they seemed to be there to conduct a transaction. From the information we're receiving, she advanced a statement, Kia Sealy advanced a statement in this matter, and the content of that statement has been revealed in the newsprint. If that is correct, she seems to be throwing him under the bus. She's indicating that they made a stop in Maloney before they went on a run to collect their child. When they stopped in Maloney, he had a conversation with somebody. He said, "Don't bother," and then he reversed and started to drive off. He increased his speed. Persons were giving chase in a vehicle close to them. She was telling him to pull over, to slow down. He said, "Don't worry." So immediately in his statement, she seems to be extracting herself from whatever energy and whatever decision that has to be made in the vehicle. And he being the driver, she seems to be operating under the framework of, "I don't know what's happening here. Why are you driving so fast? Why don't you pull over?" And he's telling her, "Don't worry." So it's not to say, it doesn't seem like there's a common enterprise. It seems based on the dialogue, if what is being carried in the newspaper is a reflection of the statement she gives, or an accurate reflection, they are not common minds in that issue. Whatever is transferring in the vehicle, she's giving instructions to stop. "Why aren't you slowing down?" And he's saying, "Don't worry," and he continues. Now, bear in mind that the officers this seemed to have been a sting operation. It seems that the informant, the person who approached the vehicle, turned out to be an officer. So whatever arrangements Mr. Samro was making with them, if what is carried in the newspaper is true, seemed to have gone awry in terms of he sensed that it is not what he embarked upon, meaning that he's engaging someone who clearly isn't about receiving a weapon, purchasing a weapon, any sort of exchange. So he brought the entire issue to a halt. Now, it is interesting that the police would have been trained to deal with confrontations of this nature. And their training ought not to be a one-off. This is retraining and training over a continuous and protracted period of time. They would have been sufficiently trained to know when to relax, when to apply force, when to engage, when not, and to control. They can control the narrative of how things go down. So
when we say control the narrative, not after the fact, but literally as it's happening.
In real time.
In real time. Control how events unfold, how they approach a situation.
And if it's a sting operation, surely they ought to contemplate that were this person to make an attempt to get out of the timeline that they're in, meaning the situation, the geographic area. If this is Maloney, what direction could he go? He can't go, he may not go up the highway, he may not go east, or he may go west. Either way, do they not have officers stationed in case of a situation like that, in east and west? So the intercepting, they don't have to chase. It's a question of zeroing on him in each direction. So they don't have to run the individual down.
My speculation would be that they assume there's contraband in the car, it's a state of emergency, and they have the right to search the car without warrant, as far as I'm aware. And I don't know if that changed the police's decision-making or not. But what I do find interesting is that the accounts tell very different stories, even though they both can be true with what we know actually happened and what ended up on tape with regards to the end of the chase. Because there was at least one report that said she was in possession of the gun, and she would have had to be if she was the one that fired the gun, right? So now it's a he said, she said between the police and Miss Sealy. And one of the other things is, according to reports, it was not just a firearm. I believe at least one report said narcotics. I'm not sure, assuming that's accurate. They didn't say they recovered narcotics in the vehicle, right? But also they didn't necessarily say that they recovered the firearm in the vehicle when it stopped. They just said that she fired a firearm, they have a firearm. I don't know if they even detailed when the firearm was fired.
One of the reports indicated that they opened the front passenger seat where Samaru was, and they found the gun there on the ground. One of the newsprints carried out. Now, my thing is this, Sean. If I'm setting up a sting operation, this is a carefully planned operation where they would have lured him into that area there. He was of the mistaken view that he was dealing with non-law enforcement. He didn't expect that it was law enforcement officers he was coming there to meet.
Right.
If it is you're setting up roadblocks, you see that there's officers on site where the roadblock is and officers beyond the site in case somebody drives off. So all I'm thinking is this chase for 20 minutes from Maloney to St. Augustine could have been preempted. It could have been determined at a different point in a shorter distance. Had officers been stationed at different points, they could have converged on him and avoided that vehicle and avoid the chase. So for experienced officers, something went wrong in terms of how they plan to execute this. So in the execution, maybe it introduces a lot of speculation from the public, and that is what is drawing people's attention, and it's upsetting the public. And you take the communications unit from the police did not in any way communicate along the way within the 4-month period. What were the initial findings? Now, one may say, well, they don't want to compromise the investigation. The investigation, yes, it remains, it's continuing, but they don't have to give accounts of what each individual experienced, meaning the different officers in the process. Yeah. They could simply give the basics that, listen, the public is seeing a video that went viral. Do not understand what is taking place. This is not a situation where the police randomly stumble on individuals. It was a sting operation, and these were the initial findings. The individuals in the vehicle had a gun. They didn't have a gun. They fired at the officers. They didn't fire at the officers. They don't need to go into the small print. They can give a context that would bring ease to the public's mind, and that enlightenment may take the speculation out of the scenario.
I think the problem is the commissioner tried to do that before the tape, and one of the mistakes potentially made was his statement was the car crashed, the occupants opened fire, the officers returned fire, and that's not readily apparent on the tape. So initially, my thought was the mistake is you're giving the people a version of events that isn't true or might not be true. Yeah. But now, at the very least, you're giving people a version of events that the video evidence does not necessarily support, and you didn't necessarily offer any kind of explanation. And again, it goes back to what you said. You don't have to you throw the baby with the bathwater and give all the details. But in other similar incidents, we've gotten basics of, we recovered a gun, they were running because of X, we were chasing because of Y. We don't have to go into all of the nitty-gritty of what this officer did and the procedure and the rules and use and all of the minor details of the investigation, to just give some sort of reasoning, because there were people willing to believe the police when it initially happened, even after the video came out. But the crazy part was, all they could say is, well, they had to run for something, because they weren't actually given any sort of reason as to what was going on and why this happened.
The optics of how it went down didn't play well with the public. One of the things that really strikes the heart of public opinion is that the Police Complaints Authority didn't get access to the young lady for 4 to 5 days.
Right, yeah.
So had they been given the opportunity to chat with her in order to carry a conversation to get her version of the facts, remember, the Police Complaints Authority is an oversight independent body. So it seems that on the surface, it smells like there's something to hide. Not allowing the Complaints Authority to come in and do what they have to do doesn't augur well for the way things went.
But would you also agree that what compounds the situation is the PCA brought up the fact that in situations where there was body camera footage, it was made available to them. This situation, apparently, based on the narrative, does not have body camera footage, and they have been calling for body camera footage. And when the topic came up after this incident, it's not as though we got, you know, a well-balanced, well-meaning statement from people in charge. We just got the justification of before, well, you know, we couldn't get it, so it was too expensive. And I know that apparently a media ambassador at some point recently came out and said they're in the process of procuring body cameras. But the commissioner, as far as I'm aware, still hasn't said it. And it's just one of those things where the messaging is unbalanced. And then you come now, and I think the one that really got the public upset is the manslaughter charge, right? So I don't know if you just want to comment on what I asked first before going into the manslaughter charge.
Well, with regard to body cameras, there's nothing that tells a story like real time. The same way we have real time video footage of what transpired in terms of the actual shooting, that CCTV footage, camera imagery, tells a story that can't be spoken of in any other way. Meaning that the video is the video. There's nothing to contest there. It's incontrovertible what we're seeing. As to what is transpiring in the vehicle, we don't have. I'm surprised that they haven't given any information. You know, now we have these camcorders or these three-way dash cams, where you're recording what's in the vehicle, you're recording what's in the front and the reverse camera to the back. Maybe one should be asking whether there's within the vehicle itself, there's a camera set up that could relate at least audibly what was taking place, or visually. That may tell a lot more. Now, with regard to the body cameras, we've gotten in and out of that conversation so many times through the years. When this government came into power and ascended the throne of office, they had cancelled a procurement exercise involving the intake of body cameras. They were saying that it was costing some $25+ million, and this could be accessed at a cheaper rate. What is being said now is that the procurement process involves tendering, and then they will have to consider the bids, and then they would conclude in terms of what is the best option to for an intake of cameras. The Minister of Homeland Security is on record of saying that right now we have 7,884 police officers rostered in this country, and they're working towards taking that number to 10,200 over the next 5 years. That resources ought to be channeled into other areas where you equip the police to perform their duties. Rather, institutionally, where there are things lacking at stations, where there is equipment needed, where there are vehicles that are needed, that is almost hinting that why ask about body cameras when there are other priority areas? And the answer to that is because they're the Kia CDs and the Joshua Samrus of this world that need some sort of clarity.
My issue is I understand there's budget constraints, but, and this is, forgive me for going a little political here, but if I was a politician, I would basically, when I'm speaking to my colleagues, I'm like, you know, we could find a few tens of millions of dollars to put this issue to bed. Because ultimately, we're going to be the ones that's going to face the fire for this, not the rank and file of the police. At least I hope not. This case is almost, it runs the risk of undermining the whole criminal justice system, which I feel, while I understand the sentiments, I'm amazed that it's gone so far so fast, right? Because I've had callers speak to that effect, and I don't understand why it seems as though the budgetary issues are so bad that you have to pick between pens or body cameras, or body armor, body cameras, and stuff in the station is prioritized over body cameras. It doesn't matter how necessary the other things are. It's a bad look, I would say, right? And as you say, you have these incidents that actually happen. Arguably, if you had body cameras and your officers did nothing wrong, in theory, this will help exonerate them in the court of public opinion.
It certainly will bring clarity. It will allow, in the case of body cameras, it could actually alleviate people's fears that, you know, the officers acted in a way that they ought not have acted. They use more excessive force. The beauty with camera imagery is it tells a story that cannot be cut and pruned and trimmed to suit the narrative. It tells it in real time. Now, when we look at what is happening, I'm of the view that she ought to have been, or even him, whatever condition he was in at the point in time when this exchange of gunfire, if there was an exchange, meaning if the civilians were in fact shooting.
Yes.
Let us say that there was an exchange. The civilians did shoot and the police returned fire. There's an easy way to solve this issue. One ought to have swabbed her and swabbed him, Joshua and Kaya, for gunpowder residue. When you're using a Glock comes with a slide and a butt. Mm-hmm. And along the slide is that striking pin. And the shell is contained in a cartridge there. When that area that is the cartridge is struck and that projectile exit the casing, the shell casing, the back of that shell casing is gunpowder residue. So there's a blowback effect when it is fired. Mm-hmm. The blowback is residue that emanates from the back towards everybody in the vehicle, particularly so the person firing. So yes, there ought to be gunpowder residue found on the trigger finger. There ought to be gunpowder residue found on the clothes of the shooter. There will be gunpowder residue found within the pores of the fabric of the upholstery in the vehicle, against the inner windscreen glass, on the dashboard, everywhere. It's a small area. The inside of the vehicle is a small area. So, and the irony is that 4 to 5 months after, if that vehicle is to be swabbed now, you will find that lead dust lodged somewhere. So it's not too late to check it, but it ought to have been checked in real time.
Yeah, the sad part is, there's a part of me that says, well, maybe they did, right?
So then why haven't they revealed
Why haven't they revealed that? Because again, I find that people in authority hide behind, well, we can't talk about nothing because of the investigation. Usually, it's when it's inconvenient, right? Usually because, we could speculate on those situations that they don't want to speak about it. Now, in this case, obviously, that's what the public is going to do, because I don't know if we've ever had a situation where you had such an incident with so little information. So the assumptions are going to run rampant on, well, they're covering it up. I mean, Mr. Samru's father basically said that they're trying to go after her to ruin her reputation or her good name, right? He didn't necessarily say who they are, but that's now out there in the media, and this is the father of the deceased. What I don't understand is, do you not understand how this is playing out in the public, this lack of information, right? And how body cameras could have been beneficial. Because when the commissioner, and he's so now wanting to protect not saying anything. He said, well, the file was passed on, charges are coming. I don't want to say who's going to be charged or whatever. I don't understand why, right? If he knew something, right? Okay, maybe it was premature. But one of the local newspapers ran a social media post that officers were going to be charged. They made that assumption, and I think it was a good faith assumption. I don't think it was no narrative where we got to make sure that the officers be under fire. I think that was just the assumption that they made. He said people, right? The commissioner is trying to be so open-ended and nondescript. So when the fact that she was charged, and not just charged for shooting at the officers, but charged for manslaughter with regards to Mr. Samru's death, the public, it literally was a situation where, because we got no information, so how is it that she's responsible for his death? Yeah. Technically, there's a scenario where that can be true. It just hasn't been explained by the authorities.
Well, perhaps we could touch on that. Murder is the unlawful killing of a human being with the intention to kill. So it has two components. There must be a killing that is not lawful, mm-hmm, and there must be, that killing must take place with the person intending to kill. So me pointing a gun at you and pulling a trigger cannot be explained in any other form than I want to take your life. The issue is whether there's any lawful reason for me taking that life. And if there's no lawful reason, pointing a gun and pulling a trigger, meaning applying deadly force, clearly reflects that I have some intention to take your life without having good reason. Now, the issue of an unlawful killing, that need not be explained. It's self-explanatory. You don't point a gun at somebody, pull a trigger, knowing that the capacity of this gun, which contains ammunition, has all the ingredients of that which it takes to compromise your life. Now, I may not shoot with the intent to kill. It may be my intention is to cause serious harm, meaning that I want to shoot at you, not to take your life.
Right.
But the mere fact that I'm shooting in your direction, and I'm not shooting at parts of your anatomy that could more than likely kill you, meaning that your torso, where there's a heart, a lung, a rib, where there's liver, kidney, I may be shooting at your knee, shooting at your thigh. One may say, well, you know, there's no intention to kill, there's an intention to cause serious harm. But even an intention to cause serious harm, which results ultimately in death, would cause a charge for murder to be preferred. So in other words, this is an instance where she is charged for, or is proposed to be charged for an act of manslaughter. What is manslaughter? Manslaughter is, it takes different forms. It's either voluntary or involuntary. Voluntary manslaughter, it's a common law charge that is laid, meaning that it doesn't exist in law in terms of the statute books, but it exists in common law in terms of charges of this nature can be preferred once certain circumstances have been satisfied. Voluntary manslaughter may involve where I intend to cause harm, or I intend to kill, but there are special circumstances, right, that would warrant me not being charged for murder, but charged for manslaughter. For instance, with voluntary manslaughter, there's the partial defense of provocation. Right. If there's a dispute between you and me, and or let us even take it, let's use something a little more sensational. There's a domestic dispute between a man and a woman. The woman says to the man that the child that you've been minding is not yours. For the past 10 years, that's a next man's child. That's your best friend's child. In that moment, the man loses self-control because he was provoked by the words of the woman and the actions of the woman. And he, in losing self-control in that moment, he shoots her, or he chops her, or he hits her with a brick to the head, or he beats upon her person. Clearly, he's intending to cause serious harm. Clearly, he's intending to compromise her life, to kill her. But he's only doing it based on things that she said. In other words, she triggered his reaction by her words and actions. And so he intends to kill, but for the provocative language of her, he would not have. So he may be charged for manslaughter on the basis of he may have voluntarily engaged the action that he did, which is a life-compromising act, but he may have done it only because he was fired up or spewed by or incited by things said or done. So with manslaughter, it's the unlawful killing of an individual, right, by provocative action, or it could be what we say diminished responsibility. And what is diminished responsibility? The diminished responsibility has to do with where somebody's mind is sufficiently impaired that they don't really understand the nature and the consequence of their actions. So somebody who has a mental health issue, they're schizophrenic. Right. Somebody who has a condition where they probably a drug addict, where the person has been sufficiently impacted in mind and in spirit, where they're not in control of themselves, or so it's almost as if there's a clinical condition that they're suffering from that compromises their ability to reason and to think and to apply logic in the way the reasonable person on the street can. So they acted knowing what they were doing, that they were applying deadly force, but with the inability to properly form an opinion or create or logically engage what they're doing with their faculties intact. So if one can establish that this schizophrenic individual wasn't in control of themselves, that they were going through a state of euphoria or a state of elevation where it was inspired by drugs, it was inspired by alcohol. Now, that doesn't mean to say a man could take 2 drinks and go on and cause somebody's death and then blame it on the rum. But if it is he has a history of alcohol dependency, and that is a clinically diagnosed condition where he his mental faculties are sufficiently affected that he's sufficiently detached, that he doesn't have control of oneself, and his mind is sufficiently disturbed that he is not in control of the things that he does. But of course that involves some science, that involves diagnosis, it involves some sort of medical evidence to support that condition, not him just saying so.
Right.
And a schizophrenic person doesn't mean to say all schizophrenic person now could go and engage the law in such a way where they could commit an act and blame it on their condition. In other words, let's evolve that a little further. One could be medically diagnosed with a condition, and that medical diagnosis is very wide, but it's not sufficient to keep you legally outside of the law. In other words, the legal parameters of a condition are much narrower than the medical. The medical may reflect that yes, you're schizophrenic, yes, you have a mental condition, yes, you're sufficiently affected by alcohol where you're a seasoned alcoholic and you're not in control of yourself, and therefore you don't understand the nature and the consequences of your act. But a schizophrenic person very well may know what I'm doing here is wrong. And if it is, you could establish that though he or she has this condition, he very well knew what he was doing.
Yes.
So this is where one would have been psychiatrically evaluated. Sometimes a man goes before the court. The court is of the view that when he appears that he ought to be assessed, he ought to be sent to St. Anne's to be diagnosed. So under the Mental Health Act, Section 6 and Section 13 of the Mental Health Act of Trinidad and Tobago, it does reflect that if an individual demonstrates unreasonable behavior, and the court is of the view that based on this unreasonable behavior, he or she has to be or ought to be get the benefit of an assessment. He could be initially sent to St. Anne's Hospital for a 14-day period where he would spend 14 days under observation by clinical psychiatrists, and then they would make an assessment of his mental health, and they would have conversations with him, they would have conversations with his immediate family, they would have conversations with people in the community. Maybe he has a history of mental illness, maybe he's an outpatient of St. Anne's who was once treated 20 years ago. He abandoned his treatment in terms of not visiting the clinic on a month-to-month basis, and therefore he's acting irrationally. He walks the community, everybody knows that he's a madman, right? Now and then if it is somebody interferes with him, he engages them. He could be violent, he may not be violent. For the most part, he's okay, everybody's cool with him. He carries lucid conversations with people in the community. It's just one day a dog bark at him and he beat the dog to death. In other words, people have triggers, mad people have triggers. So I'm using that example to explain that with voluntary manslaughter, that yes, there's an unlawful killing, but there are mitigating circumstances.
Right.
Provocation, a clinical condition. With involuntary manslaughter, and we're moving the direction of the Kia Seeley Joshua Samaru situation now. With involuntary manslaughter, there's a situation where there are 2 levels. You could be gross negligence, and let's not go into the details of that. Gross negligence deals with basically somebody owing a duty of care towards an individual. It could be a lifeguard at Maracas, who simply say, you know what, these people stupid enough after 5 o'clock to want to swim out watching all hour of water, and they're going into the horizon. I'm not going out there this hour and compromise myself. And I told them before that you see, don't go in that area where you're seeing all that riptide, all that white frothy water. They don't go there. He stays on the beach. They swim out there. They get themselves in difficulty, and he watched them die. He has a duty as a lifeguard to to do what is necessary in order to save life.
Or say if it's nighttime and the beach is closed. You know, you can't just let people keep swimming.
Right. But the lifeguard, he has a responsibility when defined hours. He's not there at night. After certain hours, there's no lifeguard on the beach.
Right.
So you go in the water at your own risk. But I'm using the lifeguard as a practical example to show that there are people that have a duty and a responsibility to look after you. And if it is they fail to perform their duty and life is compromised, then you look at the consequences of they failing to perform their duty. And if the consequence is somebody drowned, and when we examine the facts, they could have done something reasonably. It's not to say he went into the water and then when he recognized water more than flour, he withdrew himself. He could simply say, well, I tried to do all that I could, but people don't understand when I got into that water there, I was being sucked in.
Right.
So I have a duty to protect myself and at the same time see what I can do to assist you. You can't just stay on the beach. Now let's stretch the example a bit further. If it is fire officers turn up on a site, there's a burning building, they find out that there are 2 children inside, and they're saying, you know what, we have all that is necessary. We have the respirators, we have the mouthpiece, we have the fire truck there, water is being applied, and but yet still, you know what, I'm not in the mood to go inside there today, you know. Then they have a duty of care as fire officers to perform a function, and they breach that duty in not performing the function and doing at least the bare minimum, the basic, trying to at least engage that fire, trying to see if they could get in, assessing the situation as they get in, and see what they can do reasonably to save the lives of the person inside. It may apply for a surgeon also. A surgeon has to go and do an open heart surgery. If he does a botched operation, he has a duty of care to perform the skill that he was hired for or retained for, that he has by law to execute. If he doesn't provide that skill, reasonably do all that he can to save one's life, and that person, that he has breached a duty of care that he owes to his patient. That's with gross negligence. Now here where we are, the other limb under involuntary is unlawful act manslaughter. Unlawful act manslaughter is, if it is I engage in an act that for all intents and purposes is unlawful, it is criminal. And as a result of my unlawful actions, there are consequences arising out of it. Then I have to accept responsibility for whatever consequences befall me, born out of my unlawful act. So let us go on the narrative that is in the public space. Let us say that Joshua and Kaya are in the vehicle, that they are confronted by police officers in a chase from Maloney to St. Augustine. After 20 minutes of chasing, 11 kilometers of they pursuing them, they never took any preemptive steps to bring the vehicle to a stop to try to explain their position, whatever the narrative is, right? Let's forget that, you know, if they had nothing to hide, then they ought to have stopped, right? Because there are people saying that, well, why run away from the police? 20 minutes you're driving over 11 kilometers, you have something to hide. So let us take that out of the equation. When it is they got to a standstill position, if it is one of the officers says that he approached from behind, while 2 approached the forward passenger seat, well, the forward and the side passenger seat, meaning that the driver and the seat behind the driver, which is the back passenger, whereas another was behind the vehicle. The one that was behind said that he's looking through the back glass and seeing Joshua reaching for something with his left hand, and she's taking a Glock out of her bra. What turned out to be in the end a Glock out of her bra. She's saying she's taking a gun out of her bra. And at some point now, while he's seeing that, Joshua then lowers the glass and puts his 2 hands through the door. It means to say that he's saying the gun is in her hand now. Then he says he hears like a cracking sound and glass crumbling. And in his mind, she's firing that gun. So if we are working with that, then the mere fact that she starts firing upon the officers, the 2 at the side and the one, well, not the one behind because the 2 at the side, right? They are the ones within line, within trajectory of where she's pointing the gun. Then that unlawful act, she can't lawfully shoot at the police. So that unlawful act is what triggered their response. And any injury Joshua suffered as a result of her unlawful actions of shooting at the police is a consequence that she has to bear, not a consequence that they have to bear, because they would not have fired upon him but for her actions. So her actions triggered their reaction, and the consequence, meaning he is shot and killed, or 19 shots is pumped into his torso, and he dies. Then she is responsible for his death. In other words, her unlawful actions causes the death of Joshua Samaru. So therefore, her unlawful act causes his death, so unlawful act manslaughter. She did not intend to kill him. She intended to commit an act that was unlawful. And the consequence of that intended act is what ties her to the crime of unlawful act manslaughter, or ties her to manslaughter. Now, this explanation I've just given there, in no way have this been offered into the public space by the Police Communications Unit. It has not been offered into the public space by anyone as such. So you could imagine the confused public. The public knows that you shoot me, you could get charged for murder. The public doesn't understand the concept of manslaughter, of unlawful act manslaughter. They don't understand the concept of gross negligence manslaughter. They don't understand the voluntary part of somebody killing with the intent to kill, with the intention to kill, but there's the partial defense of diminished responsibility and provocation. So without that knowledge, conclusions are being drawn in a vacuum, right? So and we're operating, I'm using the narrative that is in the space. I mean, I'm taking the police side in explaining this end of it so people can understand. Of course, she is denying that she ever handled a gun. She's denying that she even knows how to use a gun and that there was a gun involved. That could easily be solved, as I said earlier, by forensic testing. The science doesn't lie. There cannot be gunpowder residue in the vehicle from the police officers' guns, because they are outside on the street. When they fire, they are pointing a gun at them, and the blowback is in the reverse direction to the vehicle, the Toyota vehicle that is there. So that Toyota Aqua that is situated against that galvanized fence. Gunpowder residue from the officers' high-powered weapons is not going to blow into the vehicle. Let us say, devil's advocate is that it's in the atmosphere there, so it can dissipate in open space because there's wind, there's rain, there's precipitation. The long and short of it is there's another aspect to this. She fires 3 shots, shown. If she fires 3 shots, then what we are saying there now is a Glock that contains a butt and a slide. When that striking pin is shot, when that projectile is released, when the shell is shattered and the gunpowder residue blows back on the participants inside of the vehicle, that shell is going to have what we call striation markings. When it was fired, the projectile, right, that is contained in that shell is released, but the shell itself would have been struck and would have engaged in a process when it was firing. And the firing process is going to cause an explosion of the shell itself for the projectile to be released. The shell falls back in the vehicle. So we're looking at, basically, if the police version of the story is correct, there ought to be 3 shells inside of that vehicle, right?
And potentially 3 bullets somewhere in that crime scene that could be found and tested.
Right. If she's shooting at them and they're standing in a public space, that bullet could land anywhere. But one thing we show, that the shells could only fall in the car, and they could only lie where they fall, which is inside of the vehicle. If the Glock was retrieved, then what ought to have been, the standard procedure would be to take the Glock into custody, take care, custody, and control of that Glock. They would bag it for evidential purposes. It would be taken to the Forensic Science Center. They would have indicated that this was used well, it was retrieved on the crime scene from a vehicle. When the police take it to the Forensic Science Center, there's a process for that gun to be handed over to Forensic Science Center. You know, what they would have done, what ought to have been done, is the vehicle was taken to the St. Joseph Police Station. So the Glock ought to have been shown to her, and they said, "Madam, we retrieved this gun in your presence," right? You're seeing that we put it in a evidential bag.
This is Miss Seeley.
Yeah, they ought to be saying this to her. Now, I'm also mindful that she was shot,
and,
so
yeah.
she ought to have been taken to hospital. But this process to package the Glock, this should have been videotaped, it should have been photographed,
yes.
And it should have been done on the camera, so people can't say, well, you know, they went and put a gun and plant a gun. So when the vehicle was taken back to station, then you have police photographers, you have police videographers. They have that sort of equipment. I would imagine that when the Minister of Homeland Security is talking about we can't spend money on camcorders at this time, or we have limited funding, they would have a police photographer on site, a trained officer at station. They would have been able to get out. Whenever there's a crime scene, there's a photographer is called one time, you know. CSI officers are called.
Yes, yes.
So that vehicle, whatever engaged there, when the vehicle came to St. Joseph Station, the photographers ought to be on site, or they ought not to engage the vehicle and process that vehicle until that is done. So you have it there, lodged at station. There's CCTV cameras in the station yard, so you bring the vehicle in. The camera footage would reflect that people went inside. So and it will also show that nobody went into the vehicle. So even if it takes an hour and a half for a photographer and CSI to come on the scene, when they open the vehicle now, at least you could forensically examine the vehicle with witnesses. Witnesses meaning officers who would not have been part of the exchange that took place.
Right.
Right? And then also, if it's being photographed and videoed, they would be able to say, look, in real time we find a Glock on the front passenger seat, or in front of the Glock at the feet of where Joshua Samuel is seated, meaning the driver, or a Glock by the console, a Glock somewhere about the vehicle. Mm-hmm. Here we found shells. They would have taken pictures of the shells. So they take a picture of the entire vehicle, Toyota Aqua, then they take a picture of when you open the door, that area, that is the door. Then they take pictures. In other words, it's a series of pictures, and then pictures of the shells in different positions.
The issue with that is, I feel as though, well, first of all, the explaining charges is important, because we tried to explain how the charges could have happened last week Friday, but I don't think we did as a good enough job. Hopefully people understand as you broke down the legalities of it, because they were saying, well, when the forensics come back, we'll know whose bullet killed him. It's like, it's not about which bullet killed him. It was about the very scenario that you defined in all of the legal terms. But I fear, though, that as you're pointing out, best case scenario and how to deal with the forensics of the evidence in the case, even if they had videography, we've reached the point where the public are going to be so, well, but you're now telling us this. They will even disbelieve, potentially, the forensics people and the chain of custody and the evidence, and they'll say, well, they planted the gun before the photographer reached. Like, we've reached the point where I think the public is now actively going to speculate on the side of disbelief because of how far the emotional roller coaster has taken them. It's going to be difficult. Because I am willing, honestly, I am not saying that she didn't shoot at the police. I am not saying that she and Mr. Samuel are 100% innocent. We don't know. And I think this is where we hope, when Mr. Williams said, trust the process, I'm trying to tell people, we're not necessarily taking the whole process. But now it's reached the point where, okay, charges are once she's made available, going to come down the pipe. I assume this is, of course, going to go to court. And at least I still have hopes that once it goes into court, we might be able to get the truth. I guess now the question is, are people so far gone that they're not willing to trust anything attached to this case?
This matter is a matter that could only be resolved in the courtroom. In the court of public opinion, people would form opinions and they would embrace that opinion and they will go to their deathbeds with it.
Yes.
But until the science disproves the theories that are being put in the public space through social media, then the speculation will continue. Trusting the process, it's easy to say trust the process. You know something, when I was looking at some of the history of the police shootings through the years, we've been trusting the process for a very long time. I think the public is attracted to this case, Healy Joshua Samaru matter, because it's young persons who, in our perception, are incapable of committing criminality. When we hear about some of the things that happen in hotspots, we tend to stereotype and assign blame to people based on appearance, based on their condition, based on you know, their lifestyle or what is said about them.
The geographic area, their racial demographic.
Right. And when I look at it, a few years ago in 2020, there was an instance where 3 young men were shot and killed. Fabian Richards, 24, Leonardo Williams, 17, Isaiah Robert, 17. These 3 young men were in the Port of Spain area taking a turn around Chacon Street. Their situation was such where they said they were going to the bank when they were engaged by police officers, and the pathologist's report reflected that they were shot in the back of the head, their backs, their legs, their thighs. It was bullet entry wounds to their back. Mm-hmm. The police said that they were engaged in a confrontation with these 3 young men, and a Glock was retrieved. If it is you are engaged in a confrontation with individuals and there's an exchange of gunfire, why are all the bullet entry wounds to the back of the individuals? In other words, the pathologist's report isn't proving or isn't on all fours with the police version of the facts. So when we talk about trusting the process, yes, we've heard that story before. And when we get down into the tight spots of the case and the nooks and crannies and get into the inner pores of what is transpiring, in the courtroom it doesn't reflect so. So I think that you can't just sell to the public to trust the process. The public has trusted the process in the past and they've been burnt. We've had McDonald Jacobs indicate in a situation involving PC Gilks many years ago that how Gilks was the victim of gunfire from an individual that the police confronted in Diego Martin. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that when the autopsy report was done, he was shot to the back of the head. And as it turned out, he was shot by from guns that officers were in possession of, was shot by his own officers. So when a commissioner comes out and says trust the process, that doesn't hold water. No. When in the case of McDonald Jacobs, when he said that Gilks suffered loss of life through gunfire attack that was posed to the police, and it turned out to be the police, then the commissioners don't always get it right.
Now, one thing with that though, was it a leak that revealed the forensics, or did the authorities report on the forensics?
In relation to Gilks?
Yes.
No, when they did an autopsy.
No, but what I mean to say, did they release the information or was it leaked? Because I am under the impression...
No, it was released.
Yeah, and this is the thing where at the very least, I think McDonald Jacobs compares more favorably, because I think it was within the span of less than a week or a week where the narrative changed because the information was released, right? So I could appreciate that, but you are very right. This was a situation where, look, they didn't even tell him the truth, apparently, right? So on some level now, and I think this is what's insidious about it, the fact that when you have these situations where there's at least 2 to 3 officers in that situation that lied to everybody until the forensics came out, then you have to now question well, at some point, you know how it is, if 3 officers could lie, and if we have that situation that you pointed to, and there's other cases as well, I don't know if you want to get into it, you look at the officers on the ground and you're saying, well, the potential is there, right? And you also look at the fact that, hey, the commissioner, the fault of McDonald Jacobs in that scenario was he trusted his officers. He trusted his officers when it turned out to not be true. So what about the rest of us? You're right on that.
That is a matter that is still before the court. Let's not use the word lie. Sometimes the police officers gave a version of the facts that the science disproves, right? With regard to lying, that means that they intentionally...
I apologize, you're right. They did not lie.
Yeah. Now, all I'm saying is I don't like the expression trust the process, in as much as we all have to trust the process. I am not saying that we ought not to wait until the matter is ventilated and litigated before the court, and we get the answers that we need by way of a judicial decision. But when commissioners say things to the public without having all the information, it compromises, compromises where things go. Now, maybe Guevara is mindful of the fact that, listen, I do not want to comment, I don't want to say something and then I have to retract it, because he would have had the experience as an officer junior to McDonald Jacobs, where his commissioner had to retract. So he's placed in a position now where he perhaps wants people to trust the process. But history doesn't sit well with us when we trust the process. There was another incident where 3 persons in 2nd Caledonia was shot and killed by police officers. One, Noel Diamond, another, Israel Moses Clinton. So there are instances all the time.
Before we get into that, we do have a caller from MOVA, I think, on the line.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Sean, I tried to call you yesterday because I wanted to simply say to the callers and to yourself that I'm watching the uproar of citizens for this action. Sean, I am over 70 years old, and I have watched over the years the amount of, and I want to call them blatant abuses by the police, by members of the police service for years. So as the lawyer was just saying that, and he called just a couple incidents. I have seen incidents, and I said this before on the show, Sean. When I was a boy and my father used to buy newspapers, I read many times in the newspaper about police officers killing their wives while killing their guns. You see, I always tell you, Trinidad, one of the 2 major problems we have in this country: lack of food and poor memory. All right, Trinidadians don't remember. They're very, and then we like to form opinions based on political party at the time and whatnot. We have a lot of issues, a lot of problems. But the police service, Sean, as a citizen, I understand if I have a situation, I have to go to the police. I don't have a choice. I can't take it onto my own hands. But if you look at the overall history of the police service is in a mess from a long, long time. You're talking about a police officer with 30+ years service killed a man in an all night party by playing with a gun, and he got off in court. Now, so even when we talk about court, questionable things there also. A gentleman was killed in St. James when police officers arrested 3 people for loitering in St. James. Loitering in St. James. 2 police officers held 3 guys for loitering. 1 police officer walked them to the station, walked 2 of them. Another police officer was walking with 1 other guy, and they got into an altercation. And you listen to the story, showed somebody come from nowhere and stabbed the guy 11 times with an ice pick. And the officer said he couldn't recognize the guy. All these things happen in this country and we just forget. And then we form opinions based on who is in power at the time. So the problem is us too. It's us too. Because we as a people, we don't intend to learn, we have no value for truth, no matter who and when and how. And that is how we were trained. And I always keep telling you, Sean, you see those early years, how we were trained and what we learned to accept.
Yes. And
who we listen to. That is what have us here even now. Right? Because the gentleman spoke about the guys on Independence Square, and there was a case that just came up up in Chumagat, I think, with some people being shot. The police have a history. This is why, Sean, you see these TDPS ambassadors, they don't really impress me. Because their job is to make the police service look good. And the only thing to make the police service look good is for police to start doing their work properly and for things being put in place to deal with disciplinary measures being handled properly, whatever body, whether with Mr. West, and these things must be given true power, true independence. But these things already have trouble Trinidadians. And before I leave, Sean, I would really like that maybe you can get a lawyer to come on a program like today and discuss noise pollution. Because you see the TTPS officers,
okay.
They a lot of them don't know what they're speaking about. I'm sorry to put it that blunt. But they don't even know what they're speaking about. And it's high time that a lawyer, they may not want to, comes on the air of some television program and go into detail about noise pollution and let people see the truth. Because we are not being told the truth. Mr. Ali said that last time, said that there was some aspect he said, I don't understand. I want to tell Mr. Ali, right, and you sure, that there's no aspect of this noise pollution problem that I don't understand. I've been fighting it, I've been agitating for over today, and I keep telling you that. So, Ali can't tell me nothing, Arun can't tell me nothing. I know more than them where that is concerned. And I know that games are being played, right, and we are being lied to at times. I know that. You know, have a good day, gentlemen.
Thank you, caller. Well, listen, regardless of my past opinions, I definitely can't push back against that opinion today, given everything that's happened. But I mean, the caller is agreeing with you. He's looking at the history, and you were pointing to another case that shows, I guess this is things that you could argue the public might have, I wouldn't say forgive, definitely have not forgotten, and potentially it's just piling up in the living memory of the public, and at some point you're going to get a camera revealing a little, well, we wouldn't say too much, the minister might say too much, and it's going to cause sentiments to boil over.
I think in all fairness, Mr. Guevara is not the most colorful, articulate commissioner that we've had.
I mean, he came off looking like a star initially. Yeah. I mean, I will agree with you. I think it's not so much, maybe articulation is not the issue, but rather the experience with regards to public communication. Because I fear a lot of politicians, you know, one should have expected the minister to not be experienced in this type of arena, right? But there are other politicians in cabinet that could have weighed in on this situation.
But I'm saying this with regard to Mr. Guevara, not to knock him, but there's a police communications unit. The police communications unit, they make pronouncements officially on behalf of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. So he doesn't have, the commissioner doesn't have a responsibility to go into details of things that he is not prepared to do. He can simply have sight of or be aware of what is being communicated. But in terms of his actual communication, it doesn't necessarily have to come from him. They can release, the communications unit can release something by print, you know. So they don't have to put themselves in the line of fire to say, well, you know, we're going to have a press conference and let the media have a field day with us.
The one thing I will disagree with the caller on is, because I guess in the area that most concerns him, he doesn't experience this. But with regards to situations like this one, the media ambassadors tend to, one, not try to make excuses. And whenever they have situations where there's potential police abuse of authority or misbehavior, they treat it in a measured way. They're not looking to throw fellow officers on the bus, but they're also not looking to dismiss the concerns of the public. And I feel as though if the commissioner just had a similar approach, and what I don't understand is if you have these media ambassadors that have enough awareness, and maybe it's because they're more on the ground, they have to deal with the public every day. So they're aware of how, you know, like the emotions of how these things goes. Whereas it seems as though people in higher office, not only do they lack the awareness, but they also, now, I can't say that I know the commissioners of police would have done this, because I believe Gary Griffith, he did take the advice of his head of communications. But usually, the stereotype of people in high office in TNT, they don't listen to their communications people. They're just there to write the speeches that they want them to write. And maybe to be yes men. How, is this good? Yes, it's good.
But there would have been a police legal office, you know. There's a police office, legal department that comprise of competent lawyers who would be capable of interpreting and putting things together. I can't speak to the internal process, but let's up the tempo a little bit. What has been said within recent times, the leader of the opposition, Penny Beckles, came out and said that she's of the view that it is high time that we strengthen the legislation as it speaks to empowering the police complaints authority to do much more than it is.
Because they are limited right now with what they could do. Isn't that correct? I think that's the issue. They can't
the thing is, David West has been calling for many years for the opportunity to be able to prosecute in these matters. That the most they can do is recommend. They're an independent body, and what they do is they interview persons when there's a shooting, they interview officers, they interview the civilians, they make findings and they make recommendations. West have stated that he made recommendations for officers to be charged in the past and they weren't. The most he can do is to make a recommendation. Yeah. He doesn't have any prosecutorial purpose, so there is not prosecutorial arm of the PCA.
He can't go to the DPP and say and get charges.
He could simply make recommendations. That is all.
So we have a Raymond in line. We'll take the call. Quick caller. Good morning. You're on here.
Hi. Good morning, Sean.
Morning. Morning.
Yes, now, this thing, this whole situation, like it take a different twist with one. I can't understand, but you can't blame the public and the citizens for saying what they had to say, because we all saw what went on. We saw it, as I say, in black and white. So we're not to blame for that. You understand? But all in one, we have to wait and see what the next process will be. I looked and I'm listening. Thank you.
Thank you, caller.
If we were to elaborate, the Penny Beckers is indicating that we should have a PCA that has powers in the same way that in Jamaica you have the Independent Commission of Investigations.
I found that was a very nice, subtle job at the current administration, because the Zoso bill, the whole thing was, you got it from Jamaica. This is a good, proven piece of legislation. I imagine that's why they offered it as such. And here we finally have a member of the opposition saying, look, I'm not just going to criticize you. I have a recommendation to make. Are you going to take it?
Well, the irony is that for 10 years under the PNM,
well, yes,
they had all the power to enhance the abilities of David West and the Police Complaints Authority, and it wasn't done.
To be fair, some of these situations that you and the public are pointing to, it didn't happen all last year. Yeah. It happened within those 10 years.
Right. And Stuart Young is on record of saying when David West was asking for prosecutorial powers to be extended to the Police Complaints Authority, that there are measures in place. If you want to prosecute, you apply for a fiat, and the state could grant or not grant the fiat to David West and company to prosecute. So this issue that there needs to be reform and enhancement to the legislation as it exists under the Police Complaints Authority has been raised for many, many years. This is David West's third term in office. So he has been saying this from very early, and it wasn't done. Now, it's ironic that Penny Beckles is saying when she's in opposition, meaning that if she's reflective and synonymous with the PNM, when they're in opposition, they're supporting it, but when they're in government, they're not.
The one thing is, and the opposition leader, not so much a lot of the people around her, which is a very interesting dynamic. I would argue she wasn't on center or core to the previous administration, right? Now, with that said, you could still say, look, your silence gave some kind of tacit approval to what was going on then. It's not like she spoke out about it.
Is she saying that ideologically that the PNM got it wrong in the last 10 years, but this version of the PNM is open to a revision of their position? That's not a question either one of us can answer.
I would argue politicians do not think that far ahead in the statements they make. None of them.
But if we get into the essence of what the MSJ is saying, which is the Movement for Social Justice, David Abdullah is saying that the PCA should be allowed an opportunity where they could examine the guns that were retrieved,
yes,
and they could examine the ammunition, and they could do their own forensic evaluation of the crime scene, given the resources that they have. But the legislation as it exists right now that empowers the PCA, the Police Complaints Authority, doesn't cater for that sort of power. So there has to be a change in the law and additional powers being granted to David West and company in order for them to have that power.
Now, years ago when we had police shootings, maybe not one of the more controversial ones, like the triple homicide that their case finished in the court, or the triple homicide that now recently, sorry, not homicide, the triple police killing that now recently went to court. Some of the other situations, this has come up, and I would say, look, you have to kind of give the police some degree of the benefit of the doubt and everything like that. But at the end of the day, it always came up The police is investigating the police. The police is investigating the police. And we've had some high-profile situations, even involving the executive. You had an arrest of a sitting police commissioner, and you also had an investigation into a current DCP who went to Barbados, and we still haven't necessarily gotten a full account legally as to what happened. We know that Barbados at some point concedes certain aspects of the case, or concedes the case. Our government at the time concedes certain aspects of the case, not fully. But those investigations have, for the public, gone nowhere. So I guess part of it is now all of these things are coming to a head where it's not just the debate on the PCA, but also the fact that we were asked to trust that the police could somehow investigate the police and everything is going to be fine. And yet we don't really, now according to the police, they do investigate their own and charge their own. We just don't see it. That's nice, but seemingly all the high-profile cases that hit the media, we never really see a result, a meaningful result of accountability. They did something wrong and they face consequences for it. Somehow it's always that seemingly it either goes nowhere, the investigation, or any court, they get off. So we do have Digicel on the line, and then we'll go back to Farid after. Digicel, good morning, you on here?
Hi, good morning, Mr. Swan and Mr. Ali.
Morning, morning.
I mean, everybody is entitled to their opinion and the case. I mean, those who don't know and those who know believe that they are right and wrong. Who are wrong believe they are right. The fact remains, all of what transpired doesn't look good to the naked eye by anybody. But the fact remains, charges are going to be laid, which means there's nothing you can do about that until you get a court hearing. And when everything goes to court, everything will be relieved, right or wrong, for the party, Samaru, and the police. If the police has to court the account, they'll record and they'll sit. So people have to understand all of this. And not to say that if we judge the case, you cannot do anything like that, because we don't know what evidence the DPP saw and what he by giving instructions to charge. So that's my idea of what is happening. The only thing I'm not hearing anybody is saying, if that car didn't crash, would the driver have stopped or continue his way until something else happened? That's the only thing I have to say. Thank you for taking my call, and you enjoy your balance every day.
Thank you, caller. Good to hear from you again.
Which is, what the caller is raising there is the same issue that we spoke of earlier. Kia Seeley is saying that she was saying to Joshua to stop. She was telling him to stop and to tell him to slow down. And he said, don't worry. She was not in control of the vehicle. He was in control of the vehicle. She couldn't bring the vehicle to a stop. So, people don't pay attention to the little nuances in a story from time to time. To me, she has thrown him under the bus in her statement. She's extracting herself out of whatever he was engaged in. Whatever he went, they made a stop on their way to picking up their child elsewhere. So they stopped in Maloney, engaged an individual. The individual they engaged happened to be a police officer, and that officer was carrying conversations with Joshua Samaru on his phone for some time. In other words, he didn't just arrive there by happen chance, Joshua Samaru. The conversation he was having with the officer would have been by way of cell phone. From what was revealed in the public space, that particular informant, that particular officer who was engaging in the dialogue, his cell phone has been lodged with the cybercrime unit since, simply meaning that the contents of that dialogue is going to be replayed. They may be relying on that moving forward. What if when it is and I'm saying what if, I'm saying what if purely on the basis of, if it is there was a pre-conversation and conversations with an informant, Joshua was of the view that who he was talking to was a civilian and not an officer. And the conversation was that of something unlawful, something illegal, a plan to commit an act, conduct a transaction involving a firearm. That conversation would be recorded.
Well, dare I say, and this might be purely speculative, this might have little evidentiary value, can't necessarily confirm the source, but a month after the shooting, there was a whole story with regards to text messages from, allegedly, from the person that was believed to have met them in Maloney, and the text messages or the Instagram messages painted a very different narrative. I'm almost reluctant to go into the details of what it was, but it is part of the public record. And I'm sure members of the public have speculated further because it implies that there was a threat against Mr. Samaru. And I mean, we did have the Minister of Defense say, you know, stand your ground. If better to be tried by 12 than carried by 6, right? Which is a hell of a thing to say. And it's just one of those things where I guess politicians need to understand. They have to be careful what they say because things might come to pass in the public.
Yeah, but
I know that
there's context to standing your ground. Standing your ground in your home and standing your ground on the street is two different things.
But the implication of even the Minister of Defense saying you might have doubts that they're real police, and I mean, again, I don't want to necessarily go down that path, but I'm just saying.
Then why didn't he make a report? Why didn't he not go to the station and make a report that there's something transpiring here, threats are being made to my person?
Well, because it's threats from someone in law enforcement. And
that doesn't prevent you. You can make a report on an officer that's threatening you. If it is the public out there, if it is there is a threat to your person by an officer who is perhaps picking on you or making threatening remarks unbeknownst to the wider police service, you can go to the PSB, which is on Henry Street in Port of Spain, and file a complaint at the Professional Standards Bureau.
But I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily know this.
Right.
And right now, ironically, and I guess as we're running out of time, one of the things that I wanted to ask you in your opinion, because it's twofold, trust and confidence. Now, for a lot of people, the first part is more important. The police is asking for the public to cooperate, for the public's understanding, at times for the benefit of the doubt. And situations like this are killing that with regards to the public. And I fear, especially given also the fact that the commissioner had a press conference where he came out against the wild goose chase with regards to the search for the missing 2-year-old in Tobago, it's just discouraging people from cooperating while the police is trying to tell people we need your cooperation. And then there's another part that I fear, that when criminals see someone with their hand up, and he might have been doing something wrong, right? That's besides the point. His hands were up and he was shot 19 times. To me, it's just begging a situation across the country where criminals, they're no longer going to surrender. They're going to just assume the police are out to get them, so why surrender? And the level of violence is going to escalate because of this unnecessarily. Because, I mean, I don't think we could say every police officer is trigger happy and is out to gun down whatever suspect is in front of them, even with all of the bad press that it gets.
I think trust and confidence is something that is built and accrued over a period of time. When you listen to persons, perhaps in your father and my father's generation, they would say that there was a time in Trinidad when the relationship that a police station had with its community was significant. You could have felt comfortable walking into a station because you knew the officers there. They would have spent time working in that community. They may have been officers who were born into that community, came out of that community and got into the service. Relationship, maybe times have changed, times has definitely changed, but officers perhaps need to forge a relationship with the community that they're policing. When you build that trust over a period of time, people would feel comfortable stepping forward and going to a station and having a conversation with an officer that they know shows some interest in the community that they're working in. But when you have persons who they're turning up on their job, and the only time they interact with the community is when it is they're engaging the community in relations and investigation, then there isn't any pre-relationship or any relation that is fostered over time that people want to step forward and lend information to. Now, you're talking earlier about the criminal justice system, people are losing faith and trust in it. I don't think that we could make a blanket statement like that, but I understand the context in which you made it. The court system here in Trinidad and Tobago works. The issue that we may have from time to time generally the public is how long does it take to work? Mm-hmm. Right? If you're taking 10 years to get justice, is it really justice? Because 10 years after the fact, witnesses are dead, the victims are old and aging, You have a woman who was raped at age 16, but at the age 27, 28, it's now going to trial. She's in a relationship with 2 children. She doesn't want her husband to know that, I was once a victim of a rape. She doesn't want her children who are going to primary school be told by the children's peers that, your mother was involved in something.
Also, can't you have cases where the arresting officers died, witnesses have died, or happens, they can't find them anymore?
That happens all the time. And that is where the public's confidence in the criminal justice system may go, but not that the courts can't come up with a correct decision.
Sorry, so it's twofold. There's trust and confidence in the police service. And then I feel that based on what callers have said, not all, but what callers have said, the blowback is also affecting the wider criminal justice system, which I find is somewhat alarming because it hasn't been engaged yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And what we have now is since December 2023, they have introduced at the judicial level the sufficiency hearings. The sufficiency hearings is a mechanism where when matters are brought of a serious indictment nature are brought before the court, no longer do we have the protracted preliminary inquiry where the determination has to be made about the consistency of the evidence or the quality of the evidence and whether there is enough evidence for a jury to hear it. And that lasts another, you have a pre-hearing in a magistrate's court that runs some length, sometimes a year to 2 years to be completed before a matter goes before the court. Now you have a master of the High Court that reviews the evidence, and there is no hearing where witnesses are called. The matter can be resolved within a 6-month period, and it goes before a jury within 6 months. It's no longer, so you're eliminating that 2 to 3 year period in remand, and the 2 to 3 year period in which the matter has to be resolved at a magisterial level before it goes to the High Court. But where we are, and I will accept the stick for that, the DPP is coming out and saying that what you've created a system where more matters are going before the High Court and we are getting to the trial process earlier. But what we haven't addressed is we don't have enough resources as a Director of Prosecution's Office to accommodate trials, meaning that more matters are being brought before the court and ready to start, but we don't have enough state counsels and lawyers to fill the posts and the courtrooms that you're creating. So you just make a big song and dance about adding 10 more judges, but yet still, do you have the courtrooms to accommodate these judges? And if you have the courtrooms, are there more state counsels arriving out of the DPP's office who could accommodate that trial process? Because if it is you don't have the human resource from a prosecutorial point of view, meaning state counsels who can lead the evidence on behalf of the police in the courtroom, then what we've done is created a bottleneck down the road. We released the bottleneck in the magistrate's court and created it at the High Court level. So the criminal justice system as we know it is evolving. It has improved in some ways. We have introduced plea bargaining and maximum sentence indication where individuals who are in the system who wish to bring closure to their matter outside of a trial, that could be done. Right now we have victim rights legislation that is being passed in Parliament, will be debated in Parliament. We also have parole legislation that is being monitored. We also have legislation that is being argued before the Parliament in relation to removing the stigma of a conviction for minor offenses. So we are at a crossroads right now in Trinidad and Tobago. Much is being done in a short period of time. And the implosion and what is arising out of this, everybody is feeling the pinch. It's unfortunate that we have instances like this where persons like Kaya Seeley and Joshua Samaru lose their lives, and we don't have information in real time. Perhaps what we should look at moving forward to bring some resolution to alleviate public fear, to remove the fear for the police or the mistrust or distrust that comes with the territory when it comes to police, is to have a communications unit that would learn from this Joshua Samaru and Kia Seeley issue and offer more information in the public space, not necessarily the details. We're not looking for the minuscule details, but at least the building blocks. It was nothing to say in the month of January that with regard to the video that went viral, there are certain things that have been recovered. The police didn't shoot into at unarmed individuals. They were armed. A Glock was recovered. With regard to the details you're seeking, there is a process and investigation that ought to be honored, but we just want you all to know this. So if you don't wait 5 months after to hear that we retrieved the Glock. Information in isolation is no information.
Exactly, but also delayed. The delay is always suspicious. The delay makes it seem less trustworthy, or you know, you've also just given time for the speculation of conspiracy theories to run rampant, and now you have to try to, from behind, react against that. Similar to the bottleneck that you was pointing out, because it's not just the fact that they don't have enough prosecutors for the new judges and the new courtrooms. The DPP was complaining about not having enough prosecutors for the pre-existing staffing needs. So now you're just compounding it. And again, you're trying to work from behind, and the catch-up, I don't know, at a time when it seems as though, I've said this before, I would like more resources allocated to law enforcement, criminal justice, and I understand we would have to sacrifice something else. But to me, it seems necessary. Now, we have a couple of comments to get through before we close out the show. So, well, I will ask it. Can we just, I'll address this at the end. Let's go to the next comment first. Logic is the science of reasoning. To reason is to be fair and sensible. Any meaningful assessment of the charges should involve an examination of the bill of particulars. Well, I don't know to what extent you're expecting Mr. Ali to go through all of the legal legislative bills governing the situation, or if you're speaking with regards to the authorities when they are saying these are the charges and we're explaining why the charges are being laid, or explaining the explanation, the why it was not a wrong act. Sorry, my words fail me with regards to the shooting incident itself. Why it was justified. So I'm not entirely sure who the comment is directed to, but I guess this generally goes back to, you know, there are situations where some information, you know, should be given to the public to try, or better explanations, I guess, so that the more information you can give, the better the explanation, the less speculation they have. That's something I've been saying about politics for quite some time now. You leave it to the public to speculate. Don't complain when they speculate. Let's go take the next comment quick. We have many matters and issues to get to. We must get to the root cause. The unemployment has to meet the basic cost of living expenses too. All problems start with poverty. I understand that, but I think in the immediate term, dealing with poverty is not going to necessarily deal with one crime, but two situations that Mr. Ali is pointing to with regards to the bottlenecks in the criminal justice system and with regards to police transparency. I guess that's to simplify it. I don't know if you have anything to add.
I think what we need is to have more public education programs. And when I say programs, I don't necessarily mean media. There's the Eastern Lawyers Association, there's the Southern Lawyers Association.
Right.
These associations have seminars all the time. They have clinics. There was one recently at Trinity Mall with regard to the Eastern Lawyers Association. The Southern Lawyers Association does some work also. The public is free to attend these clinics and ask questions of those persons on panel.
You know what I find weird? Because they have a lot, not all of them are equally qualified in all aspects of the law, but they have a lot of lawyers on YouTube that speak to cases and break it down, but they also do it in sometimes a 10-minute video, sometimes a 20-minute video, sometimes a 1-minute video, depending on the complexities. And I guess this is the unfortunate reality. The public is not looking to seek out information, right? And that is more of a public problem than a law association or authority problem, because I see issues with dissemination of information. Even when the police have things that they want to put out in the public space, is the public engaging in the channels that the police are using? So perhaps trying to figure out other channels, other, not necessarily forms of media, but forms of content to engage with the public might be useful. But then again, the public still has to opt into these things. So that's another aspect of society where it's bigger than just the police service, the law association, the criminal justice system, the judiciary, etc.
But we live in an age where all the laws of Trinidad and Tobago are available online. If it is, you look at for the public who wants more information in relation to what I'm saying, if you look at the Criminal Law Act of Trinidad and Tobago, that speaks to the issue of the police being allowed to use force, unreasonable force, in order to prevent a crime. So there is law that actually speaks to the police doing what is necessary to neutralize a threat to their person and the circumstances surrounding it. If it is there's a crime taking place, you can also, as a civilian, use reasonable force. I'm not saying deadly force.
Right.
You could use reasonable force to get involved and prevent it. So the law does, the law, I don't want to say the law is fluid, but the law is very rigid and substantive enough to accommodate persons doing what is necessary in order to ensure that right and wrong isn't abused. Another way of saying it is you can execute a citizen's arrest. If you were to see something happening when you exit this building, or if you see a vagrant hitting a civilian, if you get involved and you preempt the whatever harm is taking place there, the law protects you. I'm not marrying this in relation to what the Joshua Seeley and Kaya Seeley, Joshua Samaru and Kaya Seeley situation. I'm just saying that in terms of public education, what we need more in our community in order to take the fear out of that community is greater public education. Yes. And the public education must come from certain institutions, the Law Association, the Eastern Southern Lawyers Association, and perhaps the police also, because there's the information, the lack of information, the lack of knowledge is what causes people to form negative views, because people form views in a vacuum. And the lay person form their own views that isn't guided by any principle, any ethos, any law.
Or experience and knowledge of how to interpret the law. All right, let's take that other comment. The guest is very knowledgeable. Please allow you guys to advance his thoughts and stop interrupting him. Well, I mean, we're having a conversation. First of all, I had to interrupt him to take the calls, depending on time. And also, there was a point I was going to make, and it might not have worked as well because I didn't interrupt him towards the end there. And maybe I should have, and then allowed him to continue. Well, conversation flows, it varies. But I think I allowed you to speak on the matter. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, let me speak. Maybe they're commenting on your history in terms of other interviews.
Well, believe it or not, from people that sit across from me, I get more requests to interject than not. Believe it or not, right? So this is a very unfortunate topic, and I think part of it is it touches on so many things, and you have the emotions of all these other past cases, of the whole cry for body cameras and more transparency in law enforcement, and to some extent that as well, the whole hold up in the criminal justice system and how people are perceived to be treated in prisons, in remand, how long they're suffering while their matter hasn't even been called before any sort of substantive proceedings yet. It's still in preliminary phase for years. And I don't know if one of the things that we have to understand is if you allow so many things that are directly or indirectly connected to just bubble and people's negative emotions are allowed to just continue to grow and grow and grow before they speak about it. And that's one of the things I think locally we don't do a good job. We kind of wait until the end to then blow up, right? But if leadership and educators allow it to just happen because they think, oh, well, nothing's going on, we're fine. No one's upset yet. Well, when they finally get upset, it's going to be a hell of a thing, right? I just don't know how far it will go, because I wonder if, as much as things like this has happened before, on some level it's a little bit unprecedented with how it's unfolding now, the degree that people are upset and who they're ready to throw under the bus and blame. Because, you know, as a defense attorney, they might even try to throw blame at you if this goes on long enough, the rate that it's going. They might throw blame on the media. They might throw blame on everybody, because just how charged it is. And I fear that this is the sign of things to come as we have more charged things in the future.
Well, let's see what happens. My thing is, if it is all the protest that is taking place, and one person was arrested yesterday, if there was a little more public education, then perhaps we may not need a protest, because persons are mistakenly believing that this young lady is now going to be persecuted moving forward, when clearly she is entitled to bail. If they lay a charge for unlawful for manslaughter, she's going to be eligible to be considered and considered for bail. So once she satisfies the requirements of that is, she's not a flight risk. She is. They don't perceive that there is any substantial risk that she may interfere with witnesses and obstruct the course of justice, or and that she will attend court once released into the public space again. With these assurances and with conditions, the court, Section 12 of the Bail Act of 1994, which governs how bail is executed and how persons are placed on bail. It does say that under Section 12 that the state can seize your passport, they can put curfew hours in place, they can make you report to station from time to time. So let us say, I'm not speaking into the future, but if it is she's charged, if the persons are of the view that, you know, she may leave Trinidad and not return, her passport could be seized. It could be withheld from her, and she doesn't have the opportunity to access it. It doesn't mean to say that if she needs to travel for medical care, that she can't apply to have the passport returned to cater for a trip abroad in order to be treated and then return. I have had instances in the past where an individual, a client of mine who was a DJ, he wanted to go to Greendot Carnival to perform, to play, because that's how he makes his money. And the court suspended the reporting condition, meaning him having to report at station every Monday. Right. And the court ordered that his passport be returned for the time period that is the Greendot Carnival. He went to Greendot and did what he had to do and returned to Trinidad and then returned the passport back to the registrar of the court. So there are accommodations that could be made, but it will have to be argued in a courtroom, and the court will have to assess and make a determination.
I think also that goes in line with she's charged, she's not convicted.
Right. So you're innocent until proven otherwise. But in the interim, there are instances where the police could say they're objecting to bail being granted, or the state council could come to court and say, although you're innocent until proven guilty, we don't want you traveling, because the charge for which you're before the court is sufficiently serious that the penalty, if found guilty, is 25 plus years in jail. So therefore, we don't want to risk. You're sufficiently motivated to not return.
And there might be reason for prosecutors or the police to make those arguments in this case. And I guess part of to your previous point is, without sufficient communication and education on that, the public will probably speculate about the persecuting this poor paralyzed woman that just lost the father of a child, and look at what they're doing to she. Like that is at the end of the day, what I say, I've started to realize this. Whatever I say, however charged and critical it is, I know for a fact that there are people out there in the public that are going 1, 2, 3, 4 steps further than I am. So when I say things, it's like, it's not just because I feel this way. It's that people understand this is how the public is going to think. This is how parts of the public is going to think. Because we've heard the phone calls already. We've seen the outcry with the protesters and the social media comments on the issue. So without that education of what's going on, this whole matter, it could get worse, potentially. All right. So thank you, Mr. Ali, for joining me once again and to speak about this matter. And this is one of those things where I appreciate you coming. I wish it didn't necessarily have to be under these circumstances, but thanks once again. Thanks to the callers, thanks to the commenters. I don't know if you have any last point that you want to make.
It's a pleasure being here and sharing with you all. I think that the public needs to have a little trust and confidence in the process. She's in good hands moving forward. Well, when they do lay a charge, as they have indicated they will, she will be given an opportunity to be heard in a courtroom. She has counsel, so there's no reason why we should continue to feel aggrieved. I think we have to trust the process. There's no other way to do this.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Folks, this is Talking Man on WSND, and Capital Show, Michael Small, once again reminding you to stay safe, be responsible. Even if you're upset with the authorities, be responsible. Remember, your leaders of the Republic aren't each other. Don't forget, it's nice to be nice. so that we could all see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN